Today's podcast is brought to you by Blue Canary. The bird has landed on beautiful Bainbridge Island, conveniently located at 499 Madison Avenue. ASE Master Technician Clint Ramsey brings over 15 years of experience, award-winning diagnostic skill, and a desire to reinvent the automotive repair experience. Schedule an appointment online at bluecanary.biz or call them today at 206-451-4220. I got something for your mind, body, and soul. I got something for your mind, body, and soul.
You have found the B.I.STANDER podcast. Now here's your host with the most, Tiny Tim.
What's good, Podcastville? You found the B.I.STANDER podcast. Happy generic time of day to you. Little friendly reminder, Monday there is a meeting at the Aquatic Center at 6 o'clock. Talking about the upcoming bond measure to be voted upon. Today we have some more guests, Frank and Dawn, coming in to talk a little bit more about this issue. Hi, Frank. How you doing?
Good.
And Dawn, welcome back.
Thank you. Hi, Tim.
So this measure basically is, from what I gather, much needed maintenance, widening the lanes from 6 to 8 and flattening out the deep end. So like water polo, it's a little bit more fair. The goalie doesn't have to stand in 2 feet water on one end. And then the lanes get a little wider for the lap swimmers. Buildings a little younger than me, well over 50 years, and is somewhat dilapidated. There seems to be a lot of concern in the community and a lot of information, misinformation, disinformation, and I'm a big part of that. So I brought you two in to discuss a little bit of what you see as the factual items. Dawn, go ahead and start us off.
Okay, great. I'm just going to I am a park commissioner for those of you who don't know. And so I've been involved in this project since its inception. And I think many people know that there's been a lot of discussion about the Ray Williamson Pool, which for clarity is the lap pool, which is the colder pool used primarily by lap swimmers and the aquatic team. So I think some people don't even know which pool that we're talking about. So this is specifically the Ray pool. And it's old and in need of repair. And so as a Park Commission, we've gotten different looks at that and what we can do. And in March of 2023, we decided that we would repair the pool without asking the taxpayers for additional money. This goes all the way back over a year and a half ago. And that was because the cost of a new pool was quite prohibitive. And we really want to make sure that we can get those swimmers in a functioning facility as quickly as possible and without too much disruption to their swim schedule. In December of 2023, there was a sort of a last minute idea of adding 2 lanes and creating a consistent depth. And what that really means is excavating the entire pool that's in there, digging the decking and digging that pool out, and then reconfiguring 8 lanes within the existing structure. And so that's really adding 2 lanes is a little bit of a glossing over of what actually is happening under that construction. And so the bond measure is written in a way that gives the park district a lot of flexibility. And after that measure was voted upon, there was a clarifying measure that the board put forth to really narrow the scope of all of the activity or what was going to be happening within that pool. And so that was where the scope really got narrowed to building out 8 lanes and creating a consistent depth. All of the necessary renovations are happening irregardless of if this bond passes
Interesting.
or not.
So would those have repairs to that lane, and what kind of repairs would that have for the 6 lanes that exist there now?
Well, all of the all of the systems are going to get redone. So there's going to be cladding, electrical, HVAC. We're going to move from the chemical system that we have to a different system, try and get some of the dangerous chemicals out of that pool. That's happening either way. So keeping the 6 lane, keeping the exact same size of the pool, it'll get a new liner. And so it'll be fresh and new. And there was a thought that maybe the substructure of that pool, was in danger of failure. And we've since learned that the pool is not it's more of a concrete pool. And so if there was damage to the pipes underneath, we would see that in the concrete. So that's kind of new. And so I think there's a lot with this project that is just evolving as we go along.
Frank, what are some of your thoughts on pool?
Well, I'm just, I'm not a pool wonk. I'm not a parks wonk. I pulled the mailer out of my mailbox announcing the bond measure that the Parks District sent out, sat at my kitchen table and read through it. And I was really kind of surprised by how confusing it was compared to the usual bond measures that I've seen over many years on Bainbridge Island asking for funding for something. Usually it's a pretty straightforward process. Here's this thing we want to do. Here's why we think it's worthwhile. Here's how much it'll cost. Yes or no. And in this situation, I was looking at it, and at the end it says, if the bond measure fails, the renovation will happen anyway. And I thought, never seen that before. So, I read through it a second time, and a few days later, there was another mailer came from the Yes for Parks campaign, which is a separate organization from Parks, that was talking about all of these needs that the building has, how old it is, the swim lesson, wait lists, and a lot of other things that seem like they would really justify a funding measure.
So they were kind of adding that in.
Well, it's been mentioned, I think, by both organizations, but I think there's been more emphasis from the Yes For campaign on some of these, what I would consider to be peripheral aspects of the proposal. So I drafted an email to all the parks commissioners, just sort of explaining my confusion and asking for a little clarification as in terms of like, well, if the renovation's already fundable anyway and going to happen regardless, it'd be nice to know how much is for the renovation and how much is for this expansion, and what's really going on here, because this seems kind of strange. And Dawn was kind enough to get back to me and provided some answers to some of those questions. And so subsequently, I've been doing a little bit of digging just to try to better understand what this bond measure really is. And, I think I've figured it out. I'm not sure that the average voter that doesn't have a lot of time and interest is necessarily going to go that deep. So my sense essentially is we have 2 proposals here that are separate. One of them, we've already provided sufficient taxpayer resources to the Parks District through our normal taxes to fund, which is the renovation of an existing facility, and that's great. And the other one is adding these 2 pool lanes, which to me, I'm not really sure that's of a broad public interest that justifies a big public ask. What I'm finding personally challenging about this proposal is that it really seems to me like the renovation aspect of the bond proposal has been sort of added in there to amend the appeal of the lane expansion proposal that's a fairly narrow benefit. So I think there's a little bit of a Trojan horse aspect to the thing. And I feel like if they were asking me for $6 million, which is about what it is, to just get 2 more lanes, that would be a reasonable bond proposal. We could all sit here and decide if we think that was a good value or not. If they were asking me to fund a renovation because they didn't have the money to do it, same thing. But why combine the 2? Why combine something that we already have provided funding capacity for, and then also have the second thing that's sort of almost, an afterthought in the sequence of the promotional materials. So that's sort of how I got to be here. And I've also done a little bit more research, just being curious. I went to the first financial presentation meeting that the parks had. And I just decided, I saw one of the things that I've talked to a few family members and other people on the island that we've all had concerns with is the availability of swim lessons. And that's been boldly mentioned in promotional materials for the Aquatics Bond Measure, that there were 935 kids on wait lists or something like that last summer. And so I called up the Aquatics Center a couple of weeks ago and just asked, how long would it be before I could get a beginning 5-year-old swimmer into swim lessons? And there was really no wait at all. And, it was like 10 days. And so I was sort of surprised by that. And I've since found out that really the whole swim lesson thing is kind of a red herring. That was probably
what do you mean by red herring?
Well, I think it's a false element in this equation for a couple of reasons. One, the swim lesson backlog was a serious problem, and it's largely been solved, not by building a new pool, not by adding lanes, but by just increasing staffing and managing the facility better. And it's great that that's happening. I think we've probably got a new program director there that's part of that solution. And I'm really excited about that, because as far as I'm concerned, if kids haven't learned how to swim yet, nobody else should even be allowed in the pool until they've had a swim lesson. Like, everybody else can just wait in a parking lot. That's it. But that's not really a problem anymore. So I don't think we need to be using that as a scare tactic to try to drum up funding for this thing. That to me feels really deceptive, and I don't know why it's in there. And, I think it's a hot button that a lot of people are going to respond to. It's potentially a great marketing ploy, but it's not honest. And that sort of raised my hackles a little bit with regard to this whole thing. So that's kind of caused me to look a little deeper at some of the other aspects of it to see what's really going on. And, I think the conclusion that I've come to through information that Dawn's provided, through research I've done myself, is that this really feels like it's a fairly narrow special interest group that has a potential benefit in these lanes. Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's being billed as a broader benefit to the community. And I don't know that that's entirely accurate.
Yeah, I don't quite understand how 2 lanes is going to get more kids swimming.
No swim lessons seem to happen in the Ray Williamson Pool. So in theory, it could take some pressure off of the Nakata Pool if there are less people lap swimming there. But they're really 2 different groups that use the facilities. The pools are at different temperatures. The Ray Williamson seems like it's primarily a competitive swimming venue and an exercise swimming venue. And, there's no real indication that that's a cross-fertilization opportunity. And the other thing is, in order to gain these 2 lanes, in addition to the money, we're talking about closing the Ray Williamson Pool for a full 1.5 years.
Wow.
Which
is that true?
At the moment, yeah. And again, this kind of goes to the point of there's a lot of questions that we really just don't have the answers to. The estimate is about 18 months. But again, if the bond were to pass and we dig out that pool, anything can happen.
That would cost jobs, lose income for the pool.
From my perspective, I'm really concerned that the swim communities and especially like the high school kids, whether it's water polo or the swim teams themselves, that they don't lose 2 seasons.
Yeah, like COVID or something.
Yeah, I mean,
and there's enough taxpayer money right now in the coffers for the renovation, or would there have to be a loan taken out by the parks or what?
Yeah. So we have reserve funds of about $2.5 million that have already been allocated for this project. And the rest we would take out loans for. And again, since we don't know the exact cost of the project, where it's estimated between $5.5 and $6 million. So it would be about a $3 or $3.5 million loan that the district would take out. But that would be part of the normal operations. We have taken out loans before, and we're in a great position to be able to do that and pay it back over time and not cost the taxpayers additional money on top of what they were already giving us.
Yeah, I've heard other thoughts. An outdoor pool, perhaps at Battle Point. There's a couple other groups talking about moving a pool between the Aquatic Center and where we're sitting now today here in the Gloom Tomb. What do you know about those type of projects, and are any of those feasible?
Yeah, I can answer, and then Frank, maybe you can answer too. So again, I'm going to go backtrack just a little bit to February or March of 2023, when the commissioners decided that we were going to renovate the pool and not build a new one. And at that point, the aquatic community, or some members of the aquatic community, got together and raised some money and decided to do a feasibility study to see what it would mean to build a true competition pool that would meet all the needs of the swim teams and the water polo, and get them the pool that they would want. And so the community, I think, they came out through donors, and they raised probably close to $50,000 and did a feasibility study. And they had a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and it was really very interesting. And what they found was that our community is already pretty well endowed with pools, more so than most other communities of our size.
How so, though? Every pool is a private base, basically. If you were to go in the Burke, you'd need a membership there. If you were to go to Wing Point Golf Course to get in that pool, you need a membership there. Pleasant Beach has a wait list of like 200 people to become a member at that pool. And other than my $3.99 plastic dog pool in my yard, I think of it as like city pools where there's fountains and it's concrete and it's open for the 3 months of summer, and it's a place that people can go to cool off, and it's available to the public. Like there's equality for everyone there. There's access for everyone there. I feel like the statement you made doesn't quite make sense to me. Like there's a lot of pools for people. We can't assume everybody's affluent enough to be into one of those clubs. I'll respond to that. So the Ray Williamson Pool and the Nakata Pool, you buy passes for, and so I don't know what a pub. You can get a pass and just attend those. And the same thing at the Burke, the open pool there, the members can use it, but also you can buy day passes or regular passes just to go and use that pool. So those are open. And again, it's important to note that parks would never turn anyone away if it was a matter of money. Do you know what I mean? There's other resources out there. We're very attuned to making sure that our programs and facilities are accessible. They're also kind of inside. The Burke pool is small.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
I love an outdoor pool, sure.
Yeah, but I love a city place. I already think Battle Point is like the Green Lake health hub of the island. People are walking around it. There's the horses, dogs, bicycles. There's the little gym for gymnastics. There's pickleball, tennis, soccer, lacrosse, football. What else we got? We got astronomy. We got a hill to run.
Got a pump track for the kids riding their bikes, all kinds of stuff.
Oh, yeah, we had a birthday party and we had tricycle races on that. Did not work.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one other thing. Pools are expensive.
Does the pool make money?
Oh, no. The aquatic facility at the moment, I have my notes here, but it ran as a deficit of $819,000 last year, and is projected to be about $880,000 in 2024. So that's money that the taxpayers are already, giving for this pool, this aquatic facility to just operate. Pools cost between $500,000 and $1 million a year just to run.
Operate.
Mm-hmm. And so that's another one of my concerns. There haven't been any feasibility studies to know if we make the Ray pool larger, how much more that subsidy will increase for the taxpayers.
And Frank, you said you're not really a pool goer.
Well, I've not routinely now. I've raised 3 boys on the island, so they all learned to swim there. We all had that experience of being in the locker rooms and hanging out on the pool deck and catching them when they jump in. And
going down the slide with them.
And going down the slide with them in the dark, which is the most disturbing experience at the All Aquatics Center. I've probably done it 1,000 times. But I think it's great that the pool is there. I remember
it's a great facility.
When the original proposals for the Nakata failed in bond measures, because I think the designs were a little bit too elaborate and people thought that they were over the top and they weren't willing to fund that. And then over time that the proposals got scaled back to the point where they did get passed. And I think that was good and necessary. And I'm fully in support of reasonable public expenditures for general public benefits. One of the things, though, that I find a little bit awkward about this proposal is it doesn't really seem like it's that broad of a public benefit. It seems like it's a pretty narrow group of lap swimmers who benefit, but it's a significant public expense. And I do feel like that's part of the deception that disturbs me, because I think that's being essentially masked behind this veneer of we need to do all this public stuff. But, the Parks District is well funded and has been responsible in managing things and has the ability to do this without a bond measure, which is great. We're sitting in the barn building, which is a fantastic resource on the island. I'm looking forward to having enough free time to become a member and participate. I do a lot of these kind of things myself. I've never seen a bond measure to fund this place. Mm-hmm. My sister's heavily involved with Bainbridge Island Rowing. They have a nice facility down there on the waterfront. I've never seen a bond measure to fund that thing. These are things that are individuals and groups raise funds for privately to meet their needs, and the users pay to use them, and they're not part of the tax base that everybody has to pay regardless of need or ability. And I feel like this lap expansion, to me, seems like it's falling into a category that makes more sense to look at that way. We have enough pool facilities to meet the basic needs of people learning how to swim, people being able to exercise, people being able to do stuff. Sure, it would be nice to have more space, but, that's not necessarily a large-scale public interest.
Bigger's not always better.
Well, and publicly funded is not always fair. It's like we talked about a lot of sports and activities on the island. I coached roller hockey for years. We had to fund all of that tile and fencing and nets and stuff ourselves. The park district provided the space, and it was already a paved area there, which was great. But, there's no taxpayers covering the bill for these activities. And, it's the same with a lot of sports on the island. Most island sports hire their own coaches, pay for their own equipment. And some reason the lap swimming community seems to exist in a special reality where their coaching is apparently paid for as staff roles through the Parks District through taxpayer payments, and the facility operates at a deficit. So that's being subsidized through the taxpayers. And, this is really kind of a private sport. Nothing against it. Not necessarily sure that, every retired citizen on a fixed income needs to pay for it.
Right. Or every non-swimmer,
That too.
And then people that rent here as opposed to own a home wouldn't be paying taxes on it. It seems like it's a lot of money for a space only 2 more people could use at a given time, right? So if I read the bond correctly, it seems, and I know I said this before we got on air, it seems like the non-motorized vehicle trail bond from a few years back, that it was written so vague that it could go from anywhere from $1 to millions of dollars. And us as public taxpayers can't steer it towards a certain project that we feel is critical. It's the whole project. And then the discretion is left up to the people that are there. And, I believe the Parks Department unanimously agreed to put this bond out, but when it gets down to it, like Kobe and the parks, there's 5 or 7 people that ultimately have the vote on it. So we really need to be in connection with the people that have that power as well.
Yeah, I really do. I want to clarify my position personally on this. And so the way that the bond is written did give the district a lot of flexibility. And at the board meeting, and anyone can go and look at the board meeting minutes on the website. They're available for everyone to read. And if they were curious, they could take a look at the March 2nd meeting. And I voted for the bond measure as it's written because it does give us a lot of flexibility. And I thought, that would be really great. And I asked if we could use it to upgrade the restrooms and the locker rooms and maybe the welcoming area, and maybe do a feasibility study to see what really made sense in terms of, should we go for 8 lanes? Should we keep it 6? What are the costs going to be?
And there's not a feasibility study on this one, correct?
No, there's not. And so, I voted for it. I had been against it for many reasons, primarily because I think it happened really fast, and I am really concerned about the affordability on this island. I talked to so many people who are on fixed income or who are really struggling to actually just make ends meet. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So to clarify, at the May 16th board meeting, one of the commissioners brought forth sort of a narrowing scope of the measure as it's written. And this, I think, goes back to Frank's point where it's gotten very confusing. And so if you don't mind, I would actually like to read it.
Please.
And so it was a motion put forth by Commissioner Goodland and seconded by Commissioner DeWitt. And it says they move the following. Should the Ray Williamson Pool Renovation Bond Measure created through Resolution 2024-4 be approved by the voters on the August 6, 2024 ballot, then the board hereby clarifies that its intent is to expand the Ray Williamson Pool to an 8-lane width and create an even depth of 6.5 feet, so long as the construction is financially feasible. And I oppose that motion. I was not in favor of narrowing the scope of the bond.
So it was unanimously voted upon, and then it was corrected in verbiage, and then you were against it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I'm gathering more and more information between yesterday's podcast and today's.
I would encourage folks, if you want to read the entire meeting minutes, you can hear the commissioner's discussion, and that was from the board meeting minutes of May 16th of 2024.
And what's the Parks Department or Aquatic Center website?
If you just go to biparks.org,
Gotcha.
and then you go, I think it's community, or you can see community information meeting minutes there.
Yeah. What is it's kind of like other things I compare, but what is financially feasible? How do you define that?
That's why.
It's like low income housing.
Well,
what is
yeah.
that?
Well, and part of that too is, again, and this is not an easy position for me to take, but I have to stay true to,
Well, just that you're a commissioner doesn't mean you're not a citizen of our community.
my other fear is that we dig that pool up, we have no idea what we find. And it could cost, this whole project could cost 18 million, could cost 20 million. And then what are we left
without
with?
a pool and
Mhm.
kids swimming?
And so that's, I think, the financially feasible component. I don't know. I didn't write that motion.
That's
think
kind of why it makes sense to maybe have an alternative pool for a while if there's renovation on the Aquatic Center. If we could put an 8-lane / water polo type pool for the school's competition and team up with the school.
And that goes back to, I'm going to go back to, I know this is a lot of dates and a lot of stuff, but it goes back to that 2023 where the commissioner said, let's fix up this pool, get it up and running, and then we can investigate what a new pool would take and look like. And so that's also written back down in, that goes all the way back to March of 2023.
Frank, how do you see this going?
Well, it's interesting. I think I'm almost hesitant to bring this up, but I feel like it's important for people to be aware of it. One of the things I noticed early on in my research is that Commissioner Goodland is also a member of the Yes for Aquatics campaign, which is sort of, I think maybe or maybe not questionable. He's also a master lap swimmer. So I think it's great that he's a lap swimmer and that his cadre of lap swimmers are in support of this.
But do we have to separate a person in office from a person that's just being a citizen in the community, even though they overlap?
Well, I think
because Dawn's here to make the case against. He was here to make the case for. They're both in Parks Commissioner positions, but they're also people in my community, and I feel like they're going to use it or not use it, and they both have opinions.
Well, I think it comes down to, is there a conflict of interest if you're promoting something that benefits you personally as separately from the community at large? I mean, if I were on a parks commissioner and a rower, for example, and I thought we needed, a new addition to the rowing center, and I got that on a public bond measure and then was part of a campaign to promote it, that seems a little bit questionable versus if I wasn't any of those things and I did that. I don't think this is a neutral element, from Commissioner Goodland's perspective. I think he has a passion for it, which is fine. But I also think that he's seeking public funding for it, not private funding. And I think, to me, that starts to suggest there might be a bit of a conflict of interest there. I'm not excited about that. And the fact that as a parks commissioner who knows that there's not a swimming lesson wait list, why is he behind an organization that's promoting a lot of these things that personally I feel like as a voter are deceptive and confusing on purpose? It casts a shadow over not just the Aquatics Bond Measure campaign, but the credibility of the entire Parks District, which I'm very enthusiastic about in general. I mean, I think it's wonderful, the facilities and resources that this community has through the Parks District. And that was one of the things I voiced in my email to the commissioners when I was trying to understand this thing, is like, this could actually be bad for parks if it undermines the credibility of the Parks District, because we're starting to do things that don't really make sense. I think that's going to raise some eyebrows by people who are paying attention. And I think some people do.
Well said. Dawn, any last words?
No, I just,
She says no, and now she's going to talk.
that's my MO, Tim, you know that. Just one more thing. I really value our community, and I value each person who takes advantage of Parks and Rec. And from my perspective, I try to make decisions as equitably as possible and make sure that the taxpayer dollars are spread equitably amongst all of the different parks and facilities and programs. And I do the best I can to do that. And we have lots of needs, and we meet a lot of needs. I'm just going to just give a little quick plug. I know you said you had to do it, but I was out at Battle Point Park walking around, and we are working with neurodivergent community and doing, they've joined our Sakoko program. And so these are the kind of things
that tell me about those two programs real quick.
Okay. So Sakoko is our Student Conservation Corps, and it was started a couple of years ago by the Parks Foundation, Parks and Trails Foundation, to provide funding to have teenagers go and help pull invasive species throughout the park district.
We're in the child labor racket now. Huh?
Well, they're getting paid, Tim. They're getting paid. But it's a mentoring program, and they learn a lot. And a lot of, so many kids have come through that program and learned a lot and learned about other careers and other opportunities.
It's a great job for
It's
summer,
amazing.
Tim.
Yeah, it's great. And so this year we got some funding to to be more inclusive in that program. And so I think we have 12 neurodivergent folks, and then they have sort of partners. And so they're partnering. And so we're getting those kids also now out working and getting paid and building community. And I'm just so proud of that program. I'm just so excited about it. And we've been doing a lot of reforestation, and thinning of our forests to try and mitigate climate change. And these are the things that I'm really interested in. People should make their own decision on this bond. I'm not trying to convince you one way or another, but I think that lost in this discussion is the entire scope and breadth of what the Park District actually does. And we're much more than a pool. And so I think that's my final word.
Well, I'll just add that I don't necessarily feel that this is something that should be voted against on principle. I feel like it should be clear to what people are voting for or against when they cast their ballot. And that's my concern, is that this has been very deceptively presented, and that if it were clearer, that I wouldn't be sitting here. So I just feel like it's valuable to encourage public agencies to be as straightforward with things as possible. This feels really muddy to me, and I'm not crazy about that as a citizen. So that's the reason for my involvement. And people, if they want to pay $6 million for 2 pool lanes and add a $6 million slush funds to Parks budget that we don't know what it's going to be spent for, but presumably something good, that's fine. But that's what should be on the ask, and not this sort of confusing matrix of, oh, we need to do all these things, and wouldn't it be great if? Just be honest about it. That's a good way to go.
Well, Frank and Dawn, thank you for talking to me and the rest of Podcastville and everybody that's out there listening. Monday is the meeting at the Aquatic Center, correct? 6:00?
6:00 at the Aquatic Center. Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you can gather the information from part 1 and part 2 of this podcast and go out there to the meeting and voice your concerns or learn more about it. You've been listening to The Bystander. Be kind.